Hello and welcome everyone. Today I'm going to present a brand new Testware tool called I Beg to Differ. Here's an overview of today's agenda. First off, some thank yous and disclaimers, followed by some context and background around the program, and then the main event, an application walkthrough and case study, followed by example API usage, and then we'll take a look at extending the application using a plugin system, and then we'll discuss some alternative software packages, and finally wrap up with a conclusion and Q&A. So, some disclaimers. As participants in this conference, it is essential to adhere to antitrust laws to ensure a fair and competitive environment. The following guidelines are designed to help us comply with these laws. It is the policy of this conference to comply fully with both the letter and spirit of federal and state antitrust laws. Do not discuss prices for services or products or any other topics that might affect prices. Refrain from discussing plans regarding specific geographic or product markets or particular customers. Avoid conversations about membership restrictions or conditions on trade. Do not engage in discussions about product standardization that could be perceived as a restraint on trade. And if any discussion appears to violate these guidelines, please leave the meeting immediately and report the incident to the conference organizers. I'd also like to give a big thank you to our conference sponsors. In no particular order, the Standard, Dataiku, the Gunter Group, and last but not least, Oliver Wyman. I'd also like to give a special thank you to Aaron Smith for organizing and putting this conference together. Finally, the opinions in this presentation are my own and do not necessarily reflect those of the Standard, Full-Stack Actuarial, or any of the other sponsors. Alright, a little bit about myself. I'm currently an actuarial developer at the Standard, involved in an actuarial modernization process converting legacy processes onto the Dataiku platform. During the conversion process, we found ourselves in kind of an iterative development cycle, where we'd first develop a feature within Dataiku, and then we used queries to pull data from database systems like Databricks and SQL Server. We'd copy this data onto a spreadsheet, and then maybe compare the data using some formulas, and then last, analyze the differences. Once that was complete and we figured out what the differences were, we'd circle back and re-implement the feature and kind of go through this process all over again. We did this across quite a bit of data, quite a bit of database tables, and again across two different database systems. We thought that this process was kind of manual, it was a little bit clunky and slow, so we developed a tool that would kind of convert that middle part into a one-step process. We called that tool I Beg to Differ. And then we reimagined, enhanced, and re-implemented this tool with additional features and decided to release this as open source software. All right, and without further ado, I present to you I Beg to Differ. Here is kind of an overview of our application walkthrough and case study. So first we'll look at starting the application. After that, we'll define some data sources, and then we'll define comparisons. And once these comparisons are defined, we'll run the comparisons, look at how to parameterize the application, and then save our comparison definitions and load them back into the program. All right, so first topic, starting the application. Like pretty much most Python packages, this package relies on a Python interpreter to be installed on your machine. This package was developed using Python 3.12 and 3.13, so either of those should work. To install the package, we'll execute this command inside of the terminal. Now keep in mind that this package has not yet been released, and so this command won't work for now. To install this package, just using a local repo that I've been developing, I'm going to open a command line, and I'm just going to say pip install and copy this path in. So for once the package is available in PyPy, you don't need this local path. You would just say I beg to differ. So you just hit pip install and then enter, and the package should install. All right, and it's done installing. All right, once the package is is finished installing, you could start it by using this command, python m I beg to differ GUI. This command can also be saved as a batch file, which is what I've done in this case. So if I go over here, I could see that I have an I beg to differ.bat, and if I look inside that batch file, here I've got python m I beg to differ GUI. So that same command that we saw in the spreadsheet in the slide. So to start the application, I'm just going to double click on this. It's going to start running that command. And here we've got our I beg to differ application. All right. So the first thing that we need to do before running any sort of comparison is define our data sources. We can do that, go back to the application, by right-clicking on data sources and then selecting add data source. And then here we've got a drop-down of possible data sources. Now out of the box, I beg to differ supports 3 different data sources, CSV files, Excel files, and then any sort of SQL Alchemy connection. And through SQL Alchemy, we could support quite a few different types of databases. So here I've got the SQL Alchemy documentation up, and you could see here that out of the box we've got these databases, and then you could also install additional dialects that support a whole bunch more. Okay. So for our purposes today, though, we'll just be looking at CSV files and Excel files. So I'm just going to click CSV file, and then if I expand this tree here, I see I've got a CSV file now. And now I could edit this CSV file and point it at a CSV file that lives on my file system. So I'm going to double click that. Here you could see we've got a description tab. And this description tab is there to help you with documentation. So it could be whatever text you decide to provide. In this case, I'm going to say this is a demo CSV file. Okay. And then under these parameters, I'm going to point at a file path. So I'm going to hit the browse button over here. And I've got a CSV file already prepared, demo.csv, and I'm going to open that guy up. All right. So now I'm pointing at a CSV file, and then I'm going to add another data source, this time an Excel file. And the process is largely the same. So I'm just going to do right-click and then open up this Excel file over here. Okay. Double click on this, and then in the parameters, I'm going to point it at an Excel file. So I'm going to hit browse, and then I've got this demo Excel file, so I'm just going to select that and then open it. And here I've got that demo Excel file, and you can see that there's a sheet here called data. So I'm going to tell it to point at that data sheet. Okay. All right, so I've now created 2 data sources. Once that is done, I will need to create comparisons. And the way we've organized this, comparisons are organized by compare set, and that way you can kind of group comparisons and run multiple comparisons at the same time. So before I add any sort of comparisons, I need to create a compare set. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to say add compare set, and I'm going to call this demo compare set. All right, close this guy. And then under the demo compare set, now I'm going to add a compare, and I'm going to call this demo compare. Okay. And I'm going to open up demo compare. Again, we have a description field for me to add any sort of arbitrary description. And then on the data sources tab, now I can select some data sources. So if I hit this little drop down here, you could see the 2 data sources that we just defined. I'm going to select the CSV data source, and then over here, I'm going to select the Excel data source. Okay. And then I need to go to the field pairs tab. And this is where I define field pairs. Here we've got on our left side, we've got primary keys, and on the right side, we've got data fields. The primary keys are going to be used to line up the rows inside of our data source, and the data fields will be used to compare values. So I'm going to add some primary keys, and we can take a look at our data to see what a primary key might look like. So here I've got 2 columns, PK0 and PK1, and here on the Excel file I've also got PK0 and PK1. You could see here that these keys kind of exist in both different sets of data. but then again, some of them do not. For example, these yellow highlighted ones. But I'm just going to pick PK0 and PK1. These are going to be my primary keys. And this will help the program line up all of the rows in the data. So I'm just going to hit the Add button. Under Source, I'm going to select PK0. And under Target, I'm going to select PK0 as well. And then I'm going to add another primary key, this time PK1. And target PK1. Okay. And if we have a lot of fields, adding these keys one at a time can be kind of tedious. So on the data field side, we have this Auto Match Fields button. And what this will do is it will attempt to line up the fields using the field names. So I've just hit Auto Match Fields, and then you can see it auto-populated all of my DT data fields, okay? Which would be these 3 fields to the right. I beg to differ also includes a transform functionality. What that allows us to do is a little bit of pre-processing. So I could look at my transforms by, say, double-clicking on this source transforms field. And here I don't have any sort of transforms, but I can add some. So if I hit the Add button, then I could do a couple of transforms, replacing null numbers or nulls with a number, or replacing nulls with a string. I could strip white space out of the data. I can convert all the data to lowercase or convert it all to uppercase. And these are a couple of pre-canned transformations. And there's also this custom Python transform. So if none of these work for you, you could write some pure Python code if you wanted to and create some custom transform logic. So if I hit custom Python transform, close that, and I can edit this. And if I hit edit Python file, then this creates a custom Python function where I could fill the logic in at, say, line 17 over here. You can see the inputs are some values in a series, and then I also have to return a series as well. For our purposes today, though, not going to do a custom transformation, so let's do some string normalization instead. So I'm going to convert everything to uppercase on this side, and then same thing on the target side. So I'm also going to transform the data here. Going to add an uppercase transform as well. Okay. On top of that, we could also change the definition of equality. So for example, if I double click on this equals over here, I could change the comparison rule. Again, I have the ability to create a custom Python script, and then I have the option for strict equality, or I have the option to set a numeric tolerance. In this case, we could take a look at what the custom Python script looks like. And here we could see that our function is a little bit different. So we've got a source field and a target field. And what we need to do is return a series of booleans where true indicates a match and false indicates a mismatch. Okay, so similar to the transformation, you'd fill in your own custom logic at line 20, whatever you decide. Okay. Now I'm going to change this compare rule back to strict equality because not going to look at the custom stuff just yet. All right. And that's pretty much it. So we've kind of set up our comparison. All right. Next, we're going to run our comparison. So to run our comparison, I just right-click on this comparison that I made, and I could perform a couple compares using different output options. So I could create CSV files, I can create Parquet files or Excel files. I'm going to pick the Excel option, so I'm going to hit that. And then in the output folder, I'm just going to create an output file, and I'm going to hit save. And you can see from the status bar on the bottom over here, right now it's performing the comparison. And you can see that it just finished. So the comparison is now placed out in that folder that we specified. If I go to that folder, here I've got my output file, and we could crack it open and take a look. All right, so inside of this, I've got my schema comparison. So the schema comparison compares data types and columns between our two different data sources. here I've got string and OpenPyXL string, so these are all going to mismatch because these are two different types of data sources. You could see that in this column D, the diff column, that everything has an asterisk, which means everything is not matching. If I look at, however, the Py types, this is after these native types have been converted into Python, then you could see that all of these Py types match. If I go one sheet to the right, then I've got my values comparison. Remember, we lined up everything using these primary keys, so you could see that all of our primary keys are lined up. And then over here, we've got value comparisons. You could see that all of these are capitals because we implemented a field transform to convert everything to capitals. And then over here, we've got values comparison, and we could see that these values don't match, and therefore we get an asterisk. These two values also don't match, we get an asterisk, and same for these two decimal rows. So this will show us all of the values that are lined up along with any sort of matches or mismatches. If I go to the mismatches tab, that's kind of like a filter on the values compare, where we only show the mismatching rows. So if we go back to the values compare, here I've got 4 rows with asterisks in them. And on the mismatches, you could see those exact same 4 rows. The matches sheet is inverse of the mismatches sheet. So the matches sheet will only show you the rows that are matching. Off to the right, we've got a source-only sheet. This sheet displays records that are only found inside of the source data source. These are records that cannot be compared to the target because they don't exist inside of the target, according to the primary keys that we've set. The same thing on the target-only sheet. These rows are rows that only exist inside of the target data source. They do not exist inside of the source data source, and therefore they cannot be compared because there's no matching primary key to compare against. There are also 2 more sheets that are not shown here. There's a source duplicate and a target duplicate sheet. Those sheets contain duplicates where there are duplicate primary keys, which makes it for an ambiguous comparison. So any sort of duplicates are set aside first and are not compared by the program. Okay. All right. So now we could look at application parameterization. The I beg to differ program comes with a wildcard system. So if I open up wildcard sets, I can take a look inside to see what that looks like. Wildcards are key value pairs that can be substituted into parameters within the rest of the comparisons. So here's an example. Perhaps we want to parameterize the sheet name that we use for our Excel file. So in the wildcard name, I'm going to enter sheet name. And then under the wildcard value, I'm going to enter in any sort of value. Let's say spam. Okay. Now if I go to this Excel file that we've previously defined, now I could change the sheet name, and using this $ bracket syntax, I could say sheet name here, and you'll notice that it evaluates to spam. Okay. And so this will be computed at runtime. And what this allows us to do is set up one set of comparison definitions, but then multiple wildcard sets, and then we could parameterize our comparison definitions. Okay. We could also save our comparisons as .ib2d files. So what I can do over here, I'll put this back for now, and put this guy back. Okay. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to go to File and Save. And inside of this folder, I'm going to say demo.ib2d and hit save. All right, and you can see in the status bar down here, we've saved an ib2d file out there. I could take a look at that by going up here. And what this really is, it's a zipped JSON files. So if I right-click and I could open this with 7-zip or some other program, you could see that inside of here it's just a bunch of JSON files, all of my parameters. Okay. So now I've saved an ib2d file. I can close the application and then restart it. All right, by double clicking this I beg to differ.bat. All right, and then now I go to File and Open. And I'm going to reload my demo.ibtd file. And you can see here it's been loaded back into the program. And here is all of the comparisons that I have. Everything that we just did. All right. Now let's take a look at some code. For those who are interested in automating the automation, the I beg to differ package comes with a complete set of Python objects for you to use. And a sample of those objects is available inside of the project under the sample/main.py. Okay. So here I've got the I beg to differ source code up, and under here I've got sample and then main.py. Oops, this one. So we'll just go through a kind of a high-level overview of this example, and then kind of show you how the API is set up and how it works, essentially replicating the steps that we just did, but within code. So to start off with, first I'm going to create some data sources. So you can see over here, I'm creating a CSV data source. I'm creating an Excel data source in lines 29 through 41. Then I'm attaching those data sources to an I beg to differ file. So here I'm doing data sources.append. And then I'm creating our compare set object. And then I'm creating over here our compare object. Also, you'll notice that within this object, I'm also passing in I'm also creating our primary keys as well. And then down here, I'm using that auto match functionality. And then I'm taking that compare object and attaching it to the compare set. And then I'm taking that compare set and attaching it to the I beg to differ file. And then in lines 95 through 98, I am running this file. And then in lines 100 through 105, I am saving the file out. And in lines 107 through 113, I am loading the file back in and then rerunning another compare. So I'm not going to go into the details of exactly how this API is built. That will be available in the documentation in the future. But just understand that, yeah, there's an API that you could use in case you wanted to bypass the GUI and just do everything programmatically. All right, now we could talk about the extension framework. There are three types of extensions available for you to add in your own custom logic. The first is a data source extension, second is field transforms, and the third is compare rules. So if you want to implement any of your own custom data sources or field transforms or compare rules, you're free to do so. Extensions can be developed separately as namespace packages by subclassing some core classes. We could take a look at an example. An example might be creating your own proprietary data source. Say you have your own, your company has its own fixed length text file that you want to read in. Well, then you can create an extension for it and then read that into the I beg to differ program. On top of that too, there's a very basic GUI framework that we built out where GUI elements can be auto-added with minimal amounts of code. You can take a look at what that looks like as well. So here I've got this extension project. You'll notice that this is completely separate from the source code. All I'm doing is I'm using namespace packages. So I've got my source folder, I beg to differ, extensions, data sources. If I compare that to our source, you can see that it lines up, right? So I've got source, I beg to differ, extensions, data sources. So I'm just going to use namespace packages to build my own extension. And here I've only got this one file. So you could see here, I'm subclassing the basic data source and creating a data source demo class. And then I'm subclassing and overriding a couple of attributes and methods. So here I'm overriding the extension name. I'm overriding string, the load function, which returns a data frame. and then deserialize and serialize methods, which will read and write data out of the I beg to differ file, and then some special logic to return native types. And all of this will be documented in the documentation, listing out exactly which methods and attributes you need to overwrite. You'll also notice that I've got this attribute here, self.value, and it is pointing right now or is being assigned a wildcard input field object. And this, just by these lines of code, I'm able to add an input element in the GUI using this input field object. So once this is set up, what I can do then is install this package into Python. So here I'm going to open up a command line, and I'm going to do pip install, and this time I'm going to point it at my extension demo. So here, paste that in and hit enter. My bad, this path. There we go. All right, and now I installed my extension demo. And now if I restart the I beg to differ program, I'm going to go back to my batch file and restart. All right, and now if I go to add data source, now you could see I've got this demo data source. I could add that. And if I open this guy up, you'll see under parameters, I've got this value field. And you'll notice that that should correspond to this object that I've defined inside of the class. So that is a brief introduction into the extension framework. All right. Now let's discuss some alternatives. So currently there are two possible alternatives that I'm aware of. There might be more. Data compy and pandas data frame compare. If you compare those to the I beg to differ program, neither alternative offers a GUI, and both of these packages require Python coding. In addition, both of these packages, they tend to combine code and configuration because you're writing scripts to use these packages. Unlike the I beg to differ program, which kind of separates out the code and configuration because you have a separate IB2D file that contains all of your configuration. Both packages limit customization over transformation and definitions of equality. However, you can kind of mitigate this by doing some tricks around preprocessing data frames. And then there are also other differences behind data ingestion, supported data formats, and output formatting as well. These packages, however, could be useful if you need something more lightweight, could be a little bit easier to use than the I beg to differ program. All right, so I kind of mentioned earlier that this program is not yet available. We're still working on a couple of things, online documentation and tutorials, additional quality of life improvements, performance enhancements, and need to do a lot more testing, and then we'll be ready for an initial release. Very tentatively, I'm targeting somewhere in Q1 2025. All right, thank you all very much for your time. And as always, feedback is very welcome. So please let me know if you have any questions or if you'd like to find out more. All right, thank you.